What does Giggleland hide from you behind the scenes and off camera? In Giggleland, you'll explore the fun and colorful kids attraction known as Terry's Vegetable Patch. But it is a horror game, so of course it won't be that simple. From feeding an unseen beast in the basement, to uncovering a creepy surveillance room that knows way too much about you, there's lots going on off camera that we can't see. Like for instance, this hidden area where the final cutscene takes place. We'll also be breaking pretty much everything, so I hope you enjoyed today's look behind the scenes of the Giggleland demo. As always, I'll hit you with a quick recap of what we're covering so we all know the flow of events. After entering the facility, a diorama instructs you to locate some sugar, sending you upstairs to grab it and then put it into a pipe. You'll then head back and interact with the diorama again, with the lights in the little house turning on and two figures becoming visible in the window. You'll repeat this process again, grabbing a container of fuel this time, which gives you access to this back area. After powering the generator up, you'll be tasked with feeding him? It sounds ominous, and actually doing it is even worse. Once you've found a canister of pig food, you'll enter the basement, approaching this chained up box with a delivery pipe next to it where the food is placed. Next, you'll kill weeds using pesticide, and the barn beside you is now locked up with flashing police lights shining on it. After the weeds are killed, the area around you becomes a graveyard, and you'll have to use the secret staff exit in the basement to continue forward. We'll leave the recap there for now and jump back in time. So before diving into the actual game, the first place I wanted to check out was the title screen. While it looks like the entrance you start in, it's really a small reconstruction with nothing beyond the doorways. The floor extends just beyond the vegetable patch door, but it doesn't lead anywhere at all. There is something interesting hidden here though, that being a set of LED strips hidden in the game's files. These can be brought back into the game where they'll appear on both ends of the hallway, and they even function as light sources. That's all there was to this title screen though, so now let's start the game and begin exploring. Now as we load into the game, we can pull the camera back to see an aerial view of this massive theme park. This entire game takes place in 3 maps overall, and this is where the first half takes place before finding the secret staff exit later on. It's a lot bigger than I thought at first too. Back inside the level, I noticed that the player actually exists in this game. Tolie, the character you're playing as, has a full character model that's always loaded and visible in the map. She's a young girl wearing a pink rabbit hat on her head and a t-shirt with what looks like a sun on it. This character isn't visible from your typical first-person perspective, but when viewed from this angle, you'll see that they have running animations and everything. Because you'll almost never see the player from this angle, Tolie lacks any animations between an idle pose and running animation, as you can clearly see. That means when jumping, she just keeps running as usual, and crouching sort of drops her through the floor a little bit. We'll be taking another look at Tolie a bit later on, but for now I just want to show off these hilarious animations. Inside this main area, there are a couple of things that caught my interest. First and foremost, the Minecraft tree. There's nothing hidden inside, I just found it funny that it looks like a blocky tree straight out of Minecraft. Behind this area is a windmill where we grab the fuel for the generator, but unfortunately it doesn't lead anywhere like I'd hoped, and it's completely unrendered inside. In the first of our many fetch quests, we'll be sent upstairs to collect some sugar. But what does this sequence look like off camera? When dropping the container into the pipe, the lid will close on top of it and the green light on the wall comes on. But the canister never leaves and it remains here indefinitely. There's a bunch of candy and spilled milk on the floor here as well, and it's definitely worth crying over since it's clearly assimilating Tolie. Once again, you'd never know this was the case. On our way back to the diorama, we can cut some of the walking time by taking the slide instead. From another angle, I was surprised to find that Tolie just never moved. The camera moved through the slide as usual, but Tolie stayed at the entrance. After reaching the other side, she'll warp to the end, with no visible animation during the sequence. On the walls of this main room, there are figures that will appear around you, as well as a poem that will progress as the player completes tasks. Before things get spooky, I was able to bring them out with the lights on. And while they're still creepy, it's not as bad with them lit up. These entities are known as circle shadows in the game files, and I can assume they're called this because they're joining hands and forming a circle around the facility. Returning to the diorama, I want to get a closer look at it by moving the camera inside. The barn is mostly empty inside, despite being fully modeled inside and out, but the house is not the same story. If we move the camera inside, we can see that the little space upstairs is an actual room. But the rest of this object is empty and unmodeled for the most part. When you press the button to interact with the diorama, these little cutouts of two characters, a little boy and girl, will appear inside the house. After a second, they'll clip through the floor and up into sight, during which a light source illuminates the room around them. This is so tiny that you can hardly see it taking place, which actually gave me an idea. By blowing the diorama up to a much larger size, I was able to walk around it in a near life-size scale. It's really cool inspecting it from this perspective, although there aren't any collisions applied to it. The developers would never expect a game breaker to expand it and run around inside of it, but hey, here I am. With the diorama back down to its actual size, your next task is to power the generator using a container of fuel. At this point, you'll be jump scared by a dark silhouette that vanishes around the corner, and to my knowledge, where you go at this point will change where the scare happens. In this case, I went to the right and passed through the now open doorway, and here this entity appeared behind a wooden cutout. We can now get a closer look at this character, where you'll realize that it's a mostly blacked out model of the Elliot mascot seen later in the game. They're giving off some serious analog horror vibes too, since their eyes are the only part of the model that aren't solid black. This freaky character will be waiting when you walk into the area, and as you get closer, he'll quickly duck out of sight and unload. The other location this can take place in is Harley Henhouse, but it wasn't triggering this time, presumably since we already encountered him a moment ago. Something you may have missed in this back area is a hidden Elliot costume. By walking over to the nursery before it eventually opens, you can peek through the keyhole in the door to find an Elliot mascot buried halfway into the dirt. Moving the camera inside reveals that he's in this super strange position, twisted up with his feet sticking straight up into the air. But that's not the weirdest part. From what I can tell, this character costume is directly linked to the right-hand door in the game's files. That means by removing this specific door to walk inside before the game wanted me to, I ended up removing Elliot as well. There's actually a separate set of doors used for when the nursery opens later on, and I'm assuming these objects were nested together so Elliot would disappear when this room becomes accessible to the player. As you can see, I was able to remove the other door, and Elliot remained here this time, although he had no mesh collider and we can't interact with him at all. During our next task, feeding the mysterious pig, we'll head through an unreasonably dark hallway in the basement. I thought having some lights on would make our trek through this corridor less scary, but instead it just makes it 1,000 times worse. Without the fog impacting our visibility, we can see the entire walkway leading to the containment area. I'm not gonna lie either, it's just oozing demonic ritual vibes. In the room ahead, there were a couple of things I wanted to explore. For one, this duct above the shackled box. There's a grate block in the way and a pipe that feeds through it, and following it up leads to some ceiling. The pipe just comes to an end up here, something you can't see usually because of the darkness that surrounds the area. A large portion of the maps in this game are covered in thick layers of fog, and by turning them off, we're now able to see things we typically couldn't. On the topic of things we can't see, what's actually inside of the chained box? Moving the camera inside reveals that it's completely empty. Part of me is disappointed to know this, but with these giant chains restraining the box, I'm not sure I want to know what was inside. Eventually the box opens up as we're about to leave through the staff exit, and we can force the box open early to further show that there's no threat here in the first place. With the box now open, we can drop the food into the pipe and continue as usual, and nothing happens, beyond our task being updated. Back at the diorama, we'll activate it and watch as a pig cutout is replaced by a happier version. When looking inside of the display, you'll see that there are now two versions of this cutout present. As the original drops out of the player's sight, the second cutout will move up and into the player's view. It's like a real animated diorama, just without all the technical stuff inside. With this step now finished, the barn will be closed up, and police lights are flashing alongside the sound of sirens. By taking a look inside, you'll realize that the sheep that once lined these troughs are now missing. For the most part, the rest of the building stayed the same, and by removing the door, I could walk inside to take a look around for myself. The game takes a pretty creepy turn at this point, so I brought the sheep back just for the company. After using the pesticide and killing the weeds, you'll head back to the diorama one last time. At this point, the map around you will instantly change while your back is turned, and this graveyard area populates while it's out of your sight. We're still on the same map, of course, and the assets that make up this graveyard area were hidden until this point. They're simply swapped in during a time the player can't see. Inside of this spooky cemetery are a handful of unmarked graves, but what interests me most here is the one decorated with candles and other objects. I don't know if you can get over here during gameplay because I couldn't find a way in, but if you did, you'd find this headstone decorated with kids' drawings, flowers, and a little Ella plush. Beyond these, there are empty bottles, candy, and even some chains laying next to the headstone. Beyond this area, there's yet another grave, this one being adorned with a handful of flowers and a singular framed photo. It's a black and white picture of a house with a couple of people standing on the balcony. Once more, I have no clue if you could view this during a typical playthrough, but at the very least, I wanted to check it out with the area brightened up. When heading to the next part of the game, we'll pass through the basement again, this time heading to a hidden staff exit behind the container. Beyond the door, there isn't anything waiting for us, and this loading zone is essentially just an empty hallway that leads to a dead end. This is a lot more visible now that I have some lights on in the area, because without them, this entire section of the level is ridiculously dark. Continuing the game's progression, you'll arrive in this hallway which leads to a broken stairwell. Jumping down below, you'll crawl through the vents in order to continue forward, passing over an inaccessible office as you look for the exit. After leaving the vent, you'll pass by a blocked door that slams shut when getting near it. You then head back into the vents, popping out on this catwalk where the game saves a screenshot to your PC, and in it is a photo taken of Tolie by an unseen observer. Next, you'll turn the power on using a few switches, which gives you access to an elevator needed to continue. This leads you to a creepy hallway where the door slams shut behind you, forcing you to enter this room full of photos, letters, and creepy writing on the walls. Climbing through one final vent, you'll find this massive warehouse area, and in it is a blue house similar to the diorama from earlier. The room then goes dark, and a person inside of a burlap bag appears in front of you. Turning around to see Elliot standing in the doorway. The door slams shut, because people like doing that here, and the Giggleland Demo comes to an end. Recap aside, let's restart this part of the game and begin exploring. The first thing you'll come across here is the catwalk up above. The stairs are broken, but it wouldn't matter anyway since this door doesn't lead anywhere. The same applies to the door at the bottom of this area too. And beyond the cave-in, you'll see it leads to a whole lot of disappointment. As for the first vent we're traveling through, there's something funny that takes place here that you can't see. As I said previously, Tolie's animations only include her idle pose and running sequence. Because this is the case, her regular running animation is used in the vent. Even though we're slowly crawling through them, she's sprinting at a snail's pace with her head sticking through the top. In the same vent though, there's a duct that drops down into an office we can't access, and I wanted to take a closer look. Moving the camera inside, you'll find a small office area with a few separate workspaces. Two of the desks are empty, but the main work area is decorated with some familiar merchandise, and there's a hat and scarf occupying the coat rack. Behind this space is a shelf lined with black and white photos, some of which we saw earlier in the graveyard before we left. We can't access this room during regular gameplay, and even moving the camera in here can force certain assets to unload depending on where we're looking. At the end of this vent, there's this hallway area that's blocked behind a barricade and an apparently sentient door bent on jump scaring you. Moving past the barricade, you'll see that this hallway is mostly furnished inside, and there's a horrifying painting on the wall. Apparently this is an illustration from the Book of Urizen, and this photo has appeared in multiple places throughout the game so far. There's not much else here besides this, but it's still cool to see from this perspective. Now, after we exit this vent, you'll enter a catwalk where the game saves a screenshot to your computer. But there's never anybody up here. The shocking part is that the door leads to a real room this time. It has walls and a floor, but there's nothing inside for obvious reasons. What I'm most curious about is the screenshot itself, mainly if it's a pre-existing image or an actual picture from in-game. To find out, I made a wide Tolie. She looks more like a Toontown villain now, and much to my surprise, the image the game created reflected this. That means anytime the game saves a screenshot, it's unique to that session and not just a pre-exported image. This is actually a lot creepier if you ask me, since it's an actual picture taken of the player at that moment. While there isn't much to see in the following area, there is a supposedly abandoned Elliot costume in this back area. It vanishes when we come back to turn the power on. But what's interesting is that this is the same model used in the nursery earlier. The pose is the exact same too, which leads me to believe the keyhole sighting was added later in development, with the existing asset being pasted into that scene after the fact. On the level above, you'll pass through this door, and as soon as you do, the door will slam shut behind you at the same time a screenshot is being taken. Of course, there's nothing closing this door off camera, and I'm starting to realize that the haunted doors may be the scariest thing in this amusement park. Up ahead in the scary surveillance room, which I learned is called the crazy room within the game's files, we can't get a much better look at it without the player going loopy. The room is lined with creepy photographs, security cameras overlooking the previous rooms, and of course some photos of the player's Steam friend list. I was messing with these and somehow deleted them though, so they're only empty frames now. But hey, at least it's less scary. It's interesting looking at this room without your camera spinning around though. And here are a few shots of the room so you can get a better idea of what you're dealing with. There are more pictures, like the ones we've seen previously, and of course, tons of writing on the walls. Now after the game sends you through a false blue screen, you'll appear outside the crazy room again, with the doorway leading to it now missing. However, we can bring the door back with our magic powers to head inside once more. We can't interact with anything inside though, so the most we can do is look around. Moving towards the game's final cutscene, we can now take a look at this giant warehouse room. We only step into this room for a second before the lights are shut off, but now we can have a look around, which is pretty cool. The windows have curtains in them to block your view. That way you can't see that the interior simply doesn't exist. This is easier to see from the other side, where it looks more like a portal to another dimension. Something you may have not known is that the following cutscene actually takes place in the same level. And by moving the camera out of bounds, we can find this dark and terrifying location. There's a giant wall with a spotlight shining through a door, and beyond it we can see the burlap bag used in the end sequence. Tolie isn't really involved in this cutscene either, and we can move the camera back to the play area to see her still standing in the doorway. After a moment, Elliot, or at least someone wearing his costume, will appear in the doorway behind you. He just stares at you for a moment, slamming the door after a few seconds and then freezing in this position as the credits roll. And with that, that's everything I found hidden off camera and behind the scenes in Giggle Land. I hope you enjoyed this game-breaking video, and I'll see all of you very soon. Cheers!